Hi, and welcome back to the Quilter's Candy Shop. My name's Carrie, and I'm the owner of the Quilter's Candy Shop, and we are happy to have you here with us today. Today we are continuing on with our Rainy Days Quilt Sew Along, and this is the beauty that we have been working on for 7 weeks, and everything's coming out really great. So we are in week 8. We're working on our 7th and last flower block. And that block is this one right here, the daffodil. It's going to be a really simple block. You've already done this leaf stem section before. This is the new section right here. This unit is done with a template. But don't let that scare you because it's very simple. We're going to go over it step by step and we will work through it together. Now, it's not too late to join us on our sew along. Even though this video is towards the end of the series, you can go right back to the first of the series and join in and follow along. The only requirement for joining us on our sew alongs is the purchase of the pattern. This is the Rainy Days Quilt pattern by Poppy Cotton, and it's on our website for $10. It's usually $12, but for the sew along, we're offering it for $10, and you can get that now at the Quilter's Candy Shop. That's SHOPPE shop.com and pick up a pattern. You can also pick up a quilt kit if you don't want to have to pick out the fabrics yourselves. Unfortunately, this pastel version is sold out, though you may be able to find the fabrics online. We do have a quilt kit available on our website in our country colors, which are the colors that I'm making for each week. And speaking of which, last week we did the clover. And this is the clover I chose to do. Isn't it cute? The leaf is very simple, and you can color this any way you want. And I think any way you put that together is going to be adorable. Now, before we go on to choose the colors for this week's flower, I want to remind you we are starting our next sew along in April. So for a quick review, the sew along is called the Old Garden Baskets, and we will be using this pattern by Wendy Shepherd called Basket Full of Blessings. This pattern will be available on our website for purchase. If you purchase a kit from us off the website, the pattern is included for free. If you pre-order the kits, you will get them for $80, and they will ship starting March 17th, 2024. After March 17th, they're going to go to $100, and they will be in limited supply. So get your order in early. If you purchase the kit, the pattern will be included for free. Otherwise, you can purchase the pattern on its own and then shop from your own stash. Okay, well that's it. Now let's go pick out our fabrics for our daffodil. Okay, here's the colors that I've chosen for my daffodil. As you can see, we have these templates, and these are the colors that they're going to go on. And you're going to have to cut those out of your pattern. But I highly recommend that you make a copy of your pattern before you cut this out, or you'll lose the information that's on the back. All right, I'm excited that we're going to learn something new, so let's cut our fabrics. Okay, here I have my daffodil all cut out, and there's a few things to make a note of here. We're going to be making 3 of these flowers. Now, if you have a directional fabric like I do here, I was very careful to make sure that I cut these in the proper direction of the fabric. So just where you need to be careful of directional fabric, really look at the pattern and study it before you cut. All I've done is trimmed right to the line. So take your nice scissors, not your fabric scissors, but a good sharp pair of paper scissors, and cut out your templates and just cut right up to the line. I would leave a little black line on the edge of your template paper. And this is, I've done nothing special to this. This is just the paper that I photocopied my pattern on. You'll notice that 1 and 2, there's a left and a right. So I just cut a piece of fabric that fits this, keeping in mind my directional fabric, and I made 6 of these pieces of fabric. 3 of them are going to be for number 1, and 3 of them are going to be for number 2. Number 3, there is a bottom and a top. So you'll want to cut these like this, especially if you have directional fabric, instead of something like this, which could throw off the print on your triangle. All right, so let's get started putting these together. Here is one of our daffodils finished. So this upper section is going to be super simple. You just did one with stripes put together and a little stitch and flip. So I feel like you're going to be able to nail that pretty good. And also we've done this stem and leaf unit before. Here's where we have something new, and that is this template unit. We're going to do a practice run on some scrap fabric, so you might pull that aside, and then we're going to talk about how to put this all together. Okay, so here's the leaf section again, blown out with the layout, and we're very lucky today that the pattern is correctly marked. It's the same stitch and flip on the corners as you've done with all the leaf sections before, and our leaves are offset just like the previous leaf block. So go ahead and get this done, and then we will start in on the flowers. Okay, here we have our paper templates that we trimmed earlier, and hopefully when you trimmed yours you left this little black edge along the outline of the template, and you only trimmed up to that black line. We're going to use that black line to make sure we're lined up on our fabric. Let's start with template number 3 because it's going to be the easiest. If you have directional fabric, you will want to put all your fabric face up. And that's really probably best practice to get in the habit of. And I like to use a small ruler. I have this little 3-inch square because it's easier to handle. But you can also do this step with a long and narrow, or say a 6.5-inch square. But I like a smaller ruler. It just has to be big enough to get from end to end of your template. Now, as you can see, when I put this template on and pick it up, every time this is moving because the paper is light and it's just paper. So here's my trick of the day. I like to get some double-sided sticky tape, double-sided Scotch tape, and just one little square like this on the back of your template will help it stay in place while you are cutting. And then all you're going to do is lay your ruler right up against the edge. And now we have that black line. I'm going to do it over here so you can see a little better. We have the black line from the photocopy, so we can line up our template, and if it's out of place you can see white. If it's not out of place, you can only see the black, and so you can get that lined up. And then you're going to use your rotary cutter to just go ahead and cut along there. And if you cut the little black line off, that is okay. That's why we left it there. But make sure you're not cutting off too far. Now you can see when I go to rotate, if anything gets moved, the template is not moving, it's the whole fabric unit. This is a really good time to have invested in a rotating mat. I can't tell you how great they are. And I would be showing you mine if it wasn't still packed in the container. But we'll just do with it as we will. So there you go. You can see how easy it is to manipulate this now and move it around and get it right to where you want it to be, because we have that little piece of sticky tape on there, and it is not going to cause any trouble. So I've got 2 pieces cut, but I easily could have cut all 3 using this method. And now we've got these sharp points from our triangle, and we definitely want to take advantage of these angles that they have placed on here. You can use your ruler if you're not feeling too confident, but really it's just a matter of putting down your rotary cutter and pushing straight down, and putting down the rotary cutter right where you want it and pushing straight down. And now you can see I've got that nice point. I'm going to do that on all 3 corners. Just put it where I want, and I can take all the time I want to get that lined up just right and push straight down. You will be very happy that you took the time to trim these little corners off, because when you see how we have to put this together, you're going to be very glad they were there. That's all that we're taking off. You can see that's a very minimal amount, but it will make all the difference. Okay, now we've got our template comes right off. The tape stays right on the template, and it does not leave any residue on your fabric. Now, that was the easy one. And these are not hard, for sure. These are not hard. But one thing you do not want to do on your left and right triangles is have folded over fabric. You must have your fabric all face up, because if I use folded over fabric, let's say, and I cut this out, when you open this up, you'll have a right angle on this side and a right angle on this side, but that's now upside down, and when you turn it over, it becomes the other piece. Now, if you want to do that on purpose, you can do that to save some time, cut them all out like that. But it is pretty easy to end up with all lefts or all rights, or not the right number of pieces. So I do recommend that you cut these facing up. It's just a good practice to get into. So we're going to use our secret tip. Again, we're going to take just a small square of double-sided tape, put it on the back of our little paper template, just like that. And then we're going to place the template. And you can, if you feel confident this is a good right angle, you could run this right up against that edge. So you don't, that's a cut you don't have to make. But it's kind of hard to get everything lined up, especially if you're doing double layers. So I just always cut it. So I'm going to cut that angle. So we're doing the same thing. We're lining up the ruler. I'll do this side first so you can really see it. We're lining up the ruler with the edge of the template. Take your time. Don't rush it, because we want it to be good and straight. And we don't want to cut off too much of the paper. And since we're working with paper, I do recommend that you cut all the pieces you need at one time. You don't want to cut out each template and the template gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So if you feel confident, I would do all 3 layers at one time. If you don't, just be very careful in your trimming. Okay. So there's that. And it's exactly the same thing. We're going to line up each edge and cut it out exactly correct. That was a little... And don't be afraid to rotate the piece. Like I probably should have rotated that one so I could see it exactly. So I will show you on the next one. Go. And now I just have to get my little corners. So here. Yeah, see, I didn't actually get that cut right. And that's because I didn't turn it to where I could really see what I was doing. So this is a good example of do as I say and not as I do. So turn the piece so that you have a good view, because while that amount isn't a lot, it will start to add up, as we've discussed in other parts. So this one's a little longer. I'm going to stick my ruler on there to get that straight across there and straight across there. There we go. So there's my two number 2s, and now I've got my fabric right here. And just big enough? Not quite big enough. Okay, this is a good example. Here, my natural reaction is I want to make this fit because I want to save fabric and not waste any. So I might be tempted to flip this paper over. But can anyone guess what's going to happen? I'm going to end up with more of these. And we don't need more of these. I already cut these. So always make sure that your printed side is up. So I'm going to take this one away as the one that's too small for my piece. I've got plenty of room on this one. And I've got this extra fabric I'm going to put down here. There we go. And now I can cut this one out. So line this up, always in the best direction. I'm right-handed, so I always want this piece over here where I can see it, so I know I've got it lined up exactly. There we go. And now I'll rotate because we've got that piece of tape on there. My template's not moving, just my fabric is. Make sure that's lined up really good and square. I don't want to see any white. I just want to see that black line. Excellent. And rotate it again. So again, you can see how great a rotating that would be. But that piece of tape trick works every time as well. All right, and now I just have to get my corners. I'm going to turn it so I get it just right. Okay, and then I can just place this, make sure I've got it lined up. Straight down. Straight down. It doesn't take much to do these ends. This is that little longer cut, so I'm going to use my ruler to help me out there. And in there. And there we go. There we go. Now I've got all the pieces I need. Let's sew these together. Okay, since I'm a right-handed person, I always start with the right. And so we're going to just do that. We're going to take our center piece, our right hand piece, and we're going to chain piece and do all 3. For you it's 3, for me it's 2. We're going to do all our pieces. For lining up, the main thing you want to do first is get your edge lined up. Don't worry about the ends until this is all nice and flush and in alignment, and then come down and adjust for your corners. This is why See how this does not line up with this because they're two totally different angles. But that's why this wonderful, whoever thought of this was brilliant, pre-cutting these tips. Now I can line up this edge as well. This edge is not going to line up. Just this one right here, and on the other side, just this one. All right, and then we're going to take a scant 1/4 inch right down this long edge. Okay, let's see how we did. Open this up. I'm just going to do a quick little finger press. Not too much pressure because these are very biased edges. It's an odd angle and this will stretch out. And look at that. That looks great. All right, I'm going to press these and then I'll come right back. So as you can see, I have pressed these out. Okay, so again, I'm going to line up the edge first, get that the proper angle across here, line that all up, and then slide it down to get this side lined up, and then that side lines up. Okay. Going to do this one as well. A good scant seam allowance on this is really important because we're working with angles. It compounds rather quickly if you've got it off a little bit. So there we go. I'm going to press these. So this one is a little short, and if this were my real piece, I would probably either take this off or make a whole new set, because that is going to interrupt the 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're only going to have 1/8 of an inch in your seam allowance here because we're missing quite a little bit. And I think it had to do more with a bad cut because we're lined up just right down here. So this one's a better example. You can see I've got a good full 1/4 inch from the top here to this tip, because when we sew this on to the base of the daffodil, we're going to need that 1/4 inch to make a nice pretty point at the top. Okay, let's do our real ones. All right, so I have laid out my pieces for the daffodil. This is the unit we're going to put together first, so I'm going to start there. Okay, here I've got my actual pieces all cut out. I'm happy with the cutting out of my templates. I did have one that was a bad angle, and so I had to recut it. So don't feel bad if you've got to take another piece of fabric, they're small pieces, and recut it so you have a nice piece with good edges and lines to work with. So we're going to line up this edge, line up the points, and we're going to take a good scant seam allowance right down there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now normally I would just go ahead and sew the next piece on and press it all together, but because we're working with this very finicky points and seam allowance, I recommend pressing the right angles out and away from the center triangle. So like that. I'm just going to let that cool a little bit because that's hot on the fingers. Okay, now we'll add the piece on the other side. All right, let's see. Excellent. Look at that nice 1/4 inch right here. And these guys come down. I'm going to press this, set the seam, and press it out. So both sides are pressing out. That gives us a nice flat point up here. Okay, so there is our center piece. Here we have our center template unit that we just made and our D's on the sides. We're going to sew these onto here and then sew this unit onto here. And I know you know how to do that, so we'll meet you right back here. That looks really good, I think. Okay, let's see how these turned out. Oh, look at that beautiful point. Okay, as usual, we're going to set the seam, a little group pressing, get it all done at once. And I'm going to press this away from the point, just like we would do with a flying geese, even though this is not a flying geese unit. But that point is the bulky spot, so we want to take as much fabric away from that as possible. So we've got our center unit done now, and I have laid out the balance of the daffodil. So the first thing you have to do is stitch and flip your R onto your B strip. You'll want to mind the angle at which you're sewing. Don't get it confused and sew one this way, because you'll have to start over. All of this is what you have done before in previous blocks, and you should be able to accomplish this pretty quickly. I'm going to do all of these on this side first, and then I'll come back and do all of these on this side. Then we'll press all at the same time. Double check that your angles are all going the proper direction, and let's press it. All right, just like before, we're going to group press and set our seams and press under for the best results. Now you can press the opposite way. For example, this is a pretty thin piece of fabric, so I may want to press this way in order for that print not to show on the underside, and that's fine too. So I think for this one I am going to press mine out, but I think the better way to press is the other way. It just depends on how light your fabric is. Okay. Those look pretty good. All we have to do is trim the excess. Okay, our block is starting to come together. I'm going to put this bottom part of the daffodil to the top, and that'll be very easy, just like that. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to give you one more tip. Because of the direction of the angle of this seam and our seam allowance going opposite of the direction we're going to sew, we get a little bit of a bulk right here. And machines have a tendency to shove that right down into your feed dogs instead of having a good seam across. That is why a thread saver is such a handy thing. So if you're using a thread saver, and or if you're chain piecing, sew until your needle is not all the way to the edge of the piece, because that means your feed dogs are good and covered with this piece of fabric. When you bring your other piece up to it, and now, of course, you've got to be lined up with your seam allowance, as this sews off of the thread saver and onto your piece that you're sewing, the thread saver is still moving through on the feed dogs. So the feed dogs are pulling your thread saver through, but now your piece that you're sewing is connected to it. So as that thread saver comes out the other side, it is still pulling your piece across through with the feed dogs. And that is how you can save yourself from getting that little corner tucked down inside your machine. It's very frustrating. It happens to everyone, and you'll save yourself some trouble. There we go. Last one. It seems like extra work, but really, when you get in the habit of using a thread saver, you're going to love it. Just going to do a little finger press so we can see how this looks. Look at that. That's going to look so nice. All right, I think we did a good job. We got the right angles. I'm going to leave these for a minute, and I'm going to sew this part together, and then we're going to press all at once, and that'll save us a little time. I'm going to set myself up for success and move my pieces close to my sewing area. I'm going to start on the right side and do all the right side, just the same as always. Flip this over, line it up, and turn it so your piece Q is on the bottom, and that way you can manage your seam allowance here on the top. Finish off by using our thread saver, clipping all this apart. All right. Almost there. Let's press these 2 units, then we'll sew them together and we'll see our beautiful daffodil. We're going to get all of these done at one time, which is going to save us a lot of time for individual pressing. And press this top over. I love the clapper because it really does help set these seams where we're pressing things over, and I don't have to take so much time for me to sit and let them cool and continue to press them. The clapper is actually pressing that seam for me with the weight of the wood, and it's absorbing the heat, so it is helping to make that pressed seam even more beautiful. Okay, and onto these. So with this seam allowance that we have right here, this will naturally want to press out and away. And you can see that with the seam allowance. If you're worried about the fabric showing through, you can certainly press in, or you can press open. I happen to like it pressed out, and that's what I'm going to do with mine. Okay. One more seam and we're done with our flower. Okay, get all your pieces lined up. Get close to your stitching center, and we're going to have one more seam. Now, here's something we have not run into as yet. Once we flip this seam over, we're going to have a straight vertical seam lining up with the diagonal seam. We have done lots of nesting of straight seams with straight seams and diagonal seams with diagonal seams, but we haven't come across this yet, and here's what's key. When you're lining up a straight seam to a diagonal seam and you want a nice perfect joint, you need to, at your 1/4 inch, this is too tall, bring that down, flip your 1/4 inch back so you can see. And this is a good place to use pins. You know, I'm not a big pinner, but I don't want that to shift. So I'm going to make sure I've got my seam allowance at a 1/4 inch right there. Pull that back, and that's going to line up just right. So I'm going to put my pin in here to mark where my 1/4 inch seam allowance should be. That'll give me a target while I'm sewing. So line this up with your, get these edges lined up because that's going to be important. And your vertical line is not going to match up with the end of your diagonal. It's got to match up where it comes back by a 1/4 inch for your seam allowance. So pull this back a 1/4 inch, and that's where you want that to line up. So I need to drop this down just a little bit. There we go. Hold this back. And it's so much easier if you take the time to make sure, look at that, beautiful. Make sure that's going to line up. Use a pin. And take the time now, and then you only have to sew that seam once, and you don't have to unsew it later. Also in this case, you've got 2 seam allowances on the back side, 2 seam allowances on the front side. So what I would do is check here. It looks like this has a little more fabric to it, so that's going to go down by the feed dogs, and we're going to allow the machine to ease in that fabric so it all matches up nicely. Okay, here we go. Scant 1/4 inch. And take your time when you get to your seam allowance. Make sure your under part's tucked under. This is lining up, and you've got a good 1/4 inch right at the point where you wanted those to meet. Make sure the balance of your pieces are all nice and lined up, because you're only going to get one shot at this. And then there's my 1/4 inch that I'm trying to hit that I marked with my pin. Before I get to the pin, pull it out. Now, normally I would just sew those before changing, but I want to see how we did. And I can show you if I got my seam allowance right. Wow, that looks great. Except for that thread. All right, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to continue to do these 2. Then we'll put our tops onto our leaves and we'll be done. Okay, I've got my tops onto my bases, and I didn't follow my own rules, and I've got this seam allowance going the wrong direction. As you can see right here, it's supposed to be going like this, but I got it caught underneath and it went the wrong direction. So here's a way you can fix this. You do not have to take out the entire seam. You just slide Everyone should have a nice pair of little sewing embroidery sharps like this. You just slide the pointy part of your scissors underneath that seam allowance, catch one of the stitches, snip it, and now that's free. All right, so we didn't undo everything. We just need this piece of this seam allowance to go the right direction. So now we're going to press it just like that. And now I'm going to take this back to my sewing machine. I'm going to put my needle down right here, and I'm going to stitch across to here. And no one will ever know. Okay, and there you go. I started right here. You can see my little thread, and I came across and ended right here. You can see that little thread. Okay, so now there's no difference. So now I can continue on pressing just like I'm going to do the rest of these. And what do we do first? Set the seams, of course. And then I am going to press these up. Be very careful with your pressing here, because as you're pressing across, this is a diagonal, so it might stretch just a little bit. You don't want that to happen. Okay, that's looking really great. Put that under my clapper. There's a lot of instructions on YouTube and in quilt stores and stuff about pressing, and a lot of it is all good advice. But there's a little bit of a stigma about sliding your iron, and you know what I say? As long as you're not pressing like you're ironing dungarees and doing something like this, like you're getting your jeans pressed, irons are meant to slide. And you can utilize the edge of your iron to help move fabric like that. And then really you just want to let it sit once you have it in the right position. Set and hold. Move to the next place. Set and hold. I'll show you on the next one. Probably this would have been a good thing to tell you about in the first video, but there was so much for us to cover. So here we go. I use my iron to slide across and press that seam allowance, and then just set. It's the same thing as picking up and pressing and picking up and pressing. You're just sliding across very lightly and pressing. So you're just sliding into the next place. It's actually a little more accurate than picking up your iron and letting your fabric fall back into place after you've worked so hard to get it where you want it. So there we go. Hey, these are looking pretty good. All right, one more seam and we're done. Okay, and here is my little row of daffodils all finished up. I really like what I chose, and I'm sure whatever colors you chose are going to look great as well. We had nice points end up here, and I think my templates came out okay. I hope your templates came out great. If you have any questions about them, for sure put it down in the comments, or feel free to email me and I will be happy to talk you through a little bit more or give you more information on it. So that's it. That's our last flower for this sew along. But don't go away, because in the next couple of weeks we'll be doing the sashing, layout, and construction of the actual quilt top. Plus we have Debbie Record coming from her quilting studio, and she'll be talking about how to prepare a quilt top for a long arm quilter. It's going to be great. She's a great gal and you're going to love her. All right, so thanks for sewing with me, and we'll see you next week.